So VR, it's been what, 12 years? And yet here we are making nearly horizontal progress in things like field of view, battery life, resolution and performance. You know, the basics. And let's be real, I thought by now we'd have worlds like in Tron, The Matrix, a few steps away from plugging directly into brain mush. But instead it feels more like VR experiences are, well, kind of borderline janky brain. But there is hope. Solutions to these problems actually do exist, and over the next few years we might just blow past even your wildest expectations of what VR should and could be. So buckle up, because we're going on a whirlwind adventure through all the different tech that's about to transform VR into everything it could be. And it all starts here. If you have strong feelings towards this sound, then this was probably one of your first gaming experiences. Back then, our expectations were significantly lower in terms of fidelity, but with advancements in computer graphics, our expectations are a lot higher, and arguably high enough where standalone VR doesn't quite meet those expectations. And Qualcomm's Snapdragon has been the backbone of standalone VR since 2020. The original Xr2, built on a 7nm processor, powers devices like the Quest 2, offering about 1.2 teraflops of GPU performance. But fast forward to the Xr2 Gen2 in the Quest 3, which utilises a more efficient 4nm processor, and it delivers up to 2.4 teraflops. And just to give context, the Xbox Series X is about 12 teraflops. I know raw computational power isn't the whole picture, but hopefully it gives you a rough idea of where we are now. But let's skip ahead a little. The Xr2 Plus Gen 2. This new chipset is expected in Samsung's latest headset project, Muhan. This enhanced version offers a significant thermal design improvement, which is actually one of the biggest issues in VR headsets currently, and which indirectly allows for a higher sustained performance. While specific clock speeds for the Xr2 Plus Gen 2 are not publicly confirmed, a 20% increase in GPU-CPU performance is expected. It supports displays with up to 4K resolution per eye and 120Hz and can handle about 10 to 12 cameras, but it's still nowhere near what we require for at least expected fidelity in 2025. But now, speculating on the Xr2 Gen 3, which could potentially be announced this year. It's rumoured to be built on a 3nm processor. Expected specifications include an octa-core Cryo CPU, a more advanced Adreno GPU, and this configuration could deliver to 2.5 times the performance of the Xr2 Gen 2, while consuming significantly less power. And it's taken us one step closer to the M chips from Apple, but there is already a mobile chipset available today that could be utilised for VR to give us something which, to be honest, is more aligned with what we are looking for. Enter ROG, the Asus VR headset. Recently suggests that this new headset, codenamed Tarius, is expected to be the first of the new Horizon OS headsets from Meta, and according to the infamous leaker Luna, this will utilise face, eye tracking, and is paired with either a quantum dot LCD or micro OLED display. But what gives this headset the magic beans is the potential integration of AMD's Ryzen Z1 Extreme APU instead of Qualcomm's Snapdragon chipsets, with 8 cores, 16 threads, and an RDNA 3 GPU delivering 8.6 teraflops of power. This headset could outpace any standalone headset currently on the market, and that in combination with efficient eye tracking, foveated rendering, this could potentially give us even greater performance, taking us significantly closer to the Xbox Series X benchmark we mentioned earlier. On a side note, I did go over this in another video, but the ROG Ally headset could also easily support 2D gaming like the handheld. Just to put that out there. But handhelds have been the secret sauce of VR, the catalyst of technical development to give VR that performance boost we desperately need. But none of that might matter, and what I was referencing at the title of the video isn't actually directly hardware related, but those teraflop stats we saw at the beginning could be blown out of the water and define the entire future of VR. But I'll get to that in a second. One thing I really do want to talk about is my biggest issue. Well, at least I thought it was, and that's field of view. The unsung hero and also villain of VR design. Field of view is just one of those things that sounds straightforward. Just make a headset, show more. But in reality, it's more complicated than that. Think of field of view like a pie. You want a bigger slice, but it means someone else gets less. And in VR's case, that someone else is your headset's performance. Most current headsets aim for a horizontal field of view of about 90 degrees to 110, which is fine, but it's hardly a full picture. Our eyes naturally perceive a much wider field of view, closer to 210 degrees horizontally and 135 degrees vertically. The biggest issue I've seen is that pushing that horizontal field of view is like telling your graphics card double its workload. Wider field of views mean rendering more pixels, and with even tricks like foveate rendering, which only sharpens the area you're directly looking at, there's still a massive hit to performance. This is why most VR manufacturers have stuck to that sweet spot. Personally, I wouldn't call it a sweet spot, but more of an acceptable spot. Headsets like the earlier Pimax do push the boundaries with field of views as wide as 200 degrees, but at a large cost in terms of performance, bottlenecking and distortion, and that's PC VR, so God knows what it would do to standalone performance. But there's also the issue of vertical field of view, which often gets overlooked. Most headsets prioritize horizontal field of view because it feels more natural to have a wide view. But as Boz pointed out in a recent AMA, vertical field of view might actually be the solution to more immersion. Expanding the vertical view adds a sense of immersion without hammering your GPU as hard. I guess thinking about it, when you're in VR, you're often looking up and down as much as you are side to side. Adding more vertical space can make your environment seem taller, more lifelike, without needing the power of a small nuclear reactor to run it. But the anomaly here is actually the Bigscreen Beyond. It doesn't try to dazzle you with ridiculous specs or ultra-wide field of view, instead it focuses on form factor. The Bigscreen Beyond uses pancake lenses. These lenses, in combination with a tailored fit for your IPD and facial structure, leads to a significant increase in immersion. The level of customization leads to more comfort, a more immersive feel, so it really does come down to form factor, and this next technology might actually just help with that. So this is holographic pancake lenses. These lenses are much like the equivalent tech of pulling a rabbit out of a hat. They take folding mechanics of traditional pancake lenses and combine them with holographic optical elements, or HOs. These holographic layers can manipulate light in ways that regular lenses can. They can bend and focus light with insane precision, meaning thinner lenses, sharper visuals, and wider field of views, potentially pushing past 140 degrees horizontally without turning the image into a distorted mess. In short, holographic pancake lenses could give us the form factor we desire: massive field of views, incredible clarity, and a form factor that doesn't make you feel like you're strapping a toaster to your face. And I believe this prototype was based on this technology, something that's sleek and has a more optimal form factor. So now our imaginary headset from the future has the power and the form factor. But what about the games? In my opinion, there are two ways you can win over an audience in VR, and that's through nostalgia or physics. Bring good physics and you add that real-life emulation into the fantasy world. With nostalgia, it speaks for itself, and studios like Flat2 VR are proof this is what the masses want. But what we need is some continuity, and that's where studios like Nimso Studios come in. A from-the-ground-up physics interaction engine. Once physics are at a good level, I don't see the need for multiple developers to try and remake their own. It makes no sense, and the lack of consistency is why you see games with great physics and some with absolutely terrible physics. It's like the devs keep trying to reinvent the wheel without actually knowing how to make a wheel in the first place. But it's not their fault. It's just still early. The Nimso engine is by far the most advanced and accurate physics engine I've seen, and I've been watching him for about 2 years now. He plans on licensing out this engine, as he should, with more realistic and dynamic movements, both well represented in first person and from other perspectives, so it'll be perfect for single player and multiplayer. This could bring that good feeling in VR when you move or make an action and the game just responds how you'd expect. Within the first 30 seconds of playing a game, you'll know if it's jank or not just by that metric, and so a universal engine like this could bring VR into a much better place. The next piece of technology isn't just one, it's 3, and they're all required to give us the VR we deserve, and could legitimately allow for the Oasis to exist. The best thing is that in some form these already exist today, they just need a slight bit of maturity. The first part is cloud gaming. This is already getting mildly adopted. Xbox xCloud and GeForce Now are the start, and while they are definitely good enough for flat screen story-driven games, they haven't quite hit the mark with FPS games and VR, and that's because of latency. Even a 30 millisecond delay can turn your immersive VR session into a nausea-induced nightmare. But thankfully, that won't always be the case. 5G is kind of old news, but the latency potential hasn't been fully realised. With line-of-sight 5G networks, latency can be as low as 1 millisecond, and for VR, the ideal is like 10 to 20, so well within range. It just requires a stable connection, which, well, isn't easy due to the frequency and how it travels through walls, but we are definitely coming closer. Also, it's more commonplace for massive gaming data centers to be set up closer to where you live, and that's called edge computing. For example, I have an xCloud server about 50 miles from me, so the latency I experience actually is pretty good. This basically eliminates the computational issue with VR, but it can go a step further, and that's with something called server meshing. For those who weren't aware, Star Citizen devs basically invented this tech called server meshing, and what it does is divides the game worlds into regions, each handled by different servers. As you move, you seamlessly transition between them. No loading screens, no hiccup, complete persistence with all objects and players across all sections of a map. In VR, this could mean massive player-filled worlds, almost unlimited scope for scale. That's how a digital universe could exist. I guess the metaverse. But that's a lot of content to create, probably too much. But thankfully, we have generative AI. I know it gets a slight love-hate relationship, but this has actually been Meta's plan for a while, to generate worlds and ideas from a single prompt. Just listen to this bit here about the future of this tech.
But let's take that even a step further. How do you make it so that maybe just by communicating with an AI, artificial intelligence builder bot, you can tell it what you want it to build and it'll build it for you? And again, you need to have an idea. It's not like you say, build me something interesting and something interesting gets built. You still have to have some concept, but then the tools to make it come to life will just become easier and easier to use.
That, in combination with language-driven NPCs, with careful curation by devs, and suddenly we have massive, expansive worlds to explore in VR. It's these three I'm most excited about, because it takes VR in its current state and completely removes all limitations. This video is part of a series on the future of VR. I hope you are all just as excited as I am for this tech. I just hope this pace continues. Anyway, like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.